He does direct a large architecture firm in California. And in 1993, he established Mark Cavagnaro Associates in San Francisco. They've worked on different projects. They do have some museum experience, perhaps a little bigger than the Torrington thing we have here, but he's done the Oakland Museum of California, and he's worked on the Moscone Convention Center, the Bowen Center for Performing Arts, and now he's even expanded into doing U.S. embassies. He's done those. He's currently working on ones in Estonia, Trinidad and Tobago, and Burkina Faso. He's won over, his firm has won over 100 major design awards. And, we just didn't want to use any old firm for this project. So we're very pleased to have him here with us working on it. And we were delighted when he said he would fly in and talk to us today about it. Also, Mark is a member of the board of directors of 5 Points Gallery, which I guess we can thank Zoom for making that possible, since a little further away from Torrington than some of the members sometimes. He's been working with us for a while now, looking, I remember when he first came over with me, we walked around the existing campus there, and he has all these wonderful ideas. And it's great to sometimes have somebody who just isn't there every day and has more of a global outlook than somebody like me. And he's looking at it, oh, we could do this, we could do that. And I'll let him tell you all about all these good ideas he has. My classmate, Mark Cavagnaro.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, I'm nervous, very nervous. I heard my name mentioned a lot of times, and that's usually not good. I did grow up here, and it's really fun for me. I've worked on a lot of projects over the years. We're all getting older. The class is 75. But I've never presented in my hometown before, so I'm incredibly nervous. So you'll have to be kind. So as I mentioned, being born and raised here, I experienced, just before I get into the drawings, because the drawings will kind of take on life of their own, but I experienced Torrington, as my brother Paul, my other brothers Dave and Tom did too, as a kind of a manufacturing center when we were kids. Our dad worked at the Torrington Manufacturing Company, and he was an engineer, and then they became Torrin. And my uncles were different. They weren't engineers, but they were all people, I was thinking about this before tonight, who worked with their hands. One was a machinist, another a carpenter, one was a well driller, one was an electrician, and one was even a dairy farmer. And I think the things that I grew up with, realizing that they all made things, they fixed things, they were resource efficient, and they were proud of what they made, proud of what they kept moving, and they were really proud of their labor. Their labor was them. There was great pride. And I grew up in that, we all did. And I think Torrington, to me, when I think about it as I've gotten older, is really a community that's managed over the years to combine its heart with its hands. And I think that's pretty cool. And these people who we knew as parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, they loved what they did. And I think they knew that what they did was important, and they felt connected to it. And I think that's why it was, for us growing up, a really tight community. It was a super bond and identity about who we were that we all shared, even if we didn't understand it. I think Mark and Gail with the Historical Society tap into that. I think what they've been doing is fundamental. When my dad died about 16, 17 years ago, I went and met with Mark and Gail and looked at the records of where my dad worked at Torrin. I was just trying to find anything that was connecting me to my father, that I didn't know. And their files were amazing, and the depth they had, and the way Mark and Gail were able to cull them and bring them up. And I could feel connected to my own family. And I started seeing other things that reached out to other things of Torrington, friends, families, and things that I never knew were connected. And so then when they eventually talked to me about getting involved with this project, I thought, what a fantastic way to celebrate this particular community and who Torrington is, and what Torrington means, at least to me personally, and I'm sure probably to many of you, and how we all have interest and pride in what Torrington has been and where Torrington could go. So I'm genuinely, honestly honored to be part of this. The drawings I'm going to show you and walk through are preliminary. They're called conceptual because it's early on. We're still way through how to fit the building on the site, what the budget would be, technical issues. So you really need to look at it with, if not a grain of salt, uh, the idea that nothing is set in stone as much as the larger goal of trying to make the carriage house much more useful and celebrated. It's a beautiful structure that over the years, by necessity, has been, I won't say compromised, but underutilized. And when you go upstairs, there's a fantastic room that the Hotchkiss brothers built 140 years ago, and it sits there with plastic tarps over storage. And you think, wow, this should be an event space. This should be a place where people can get to. And you look at the whole project together and you say, if we only had more room for people to come down here and see our history, see our things, understand about our grandparents and great grandparents, for kids to come down from school and learn about this object history of a town that was proud to build things and make things. So with that said, I'm going to start walking through the specific drawings and if I could just ask you, I think maybe I can do this myself. Yeah. Okay. Here's an aerial view looking at it from west to east, and you see the Hotchkiss Filer, the Carson House, and the Carriage House, and the beautiful old Torrington Cemetery behind, St. John Church, and over the left, the Eagles. And it's a amazing opportunity to have a facility like this in the middle of downtown, uh, 100 yards from City Hall, 30 yards from a major church. Other projects I've worked on over the years never have the luxury of being so connected to the core of the city. This is truly pretty extraordinary. If we start just, I'm gonna look at a few photos so we can all reconnect with it, but the Carson, uh, the Hotchkiss Filer house, multicolored. I was really touched when I started looking at this house some years ago with Mark and Gail. This two-tone quality, the lower floor and the upper floor being two colors, two materials. And you see that with the carriage house, and a lot of the houses near where I grew up were like that because these were two-family houses. And it was a way back when they were building these 100+ years ago to give each family some identity within the same structure. And it's part of the character of the town. And these were very luxurious structures, but they kept that nature of trying to reflect this two-story structure with different materials and really be quite proud of it. So I like that. And here you see the Carson House on the right, the Hotchkiss Filer House on the left. And I was very enamored with this porte cochere that's underutilized now. And I realized when I first came here that as you enter through it, it has a beautiful axial view off to the carriage house and the garage. That's the image on the right. It's unfortunately now obviously covered up with plywood, and the garage is just a more modern garage door. But I started thinking, if we were to have a campus of 3 useful buildings, it's in the center, the carriage house, and coming through the porte cochere and the framing it has of the rear building, it's a real natural place to maybe think of an entry that serves the whole campus. These are other views looking at the carriage house on the left from Main Street, but elevated. And here's a view from the northeast, looking back towards the little automotive garage, but you see that it's integrated into Hotchkiss Filer. It's really not a readily detachable structure. The double hung windows, the rhythm of the windows, the siding is very much part of the feel of that older building. You really don't want to cut it off, lose it, or in any way, I think, threaten it. And then if we look from the southwest, we see that neat little glass greenhouse, the ADA accessible ramp on the front, which is unfortunate but necessary. And to the right, you see the Hotchkiss Filer house in the background. So this is the site looking down, and we know it well. You guys know better than I do, but I went to St. Peter School, so we used to walk here to get to the buses at what we used to call St. Francis School. But the cemetery and to the right, and the church below. And so we talked about the addition in the northeast corner to explain it so that it doesn't get in the way of the visual identity of the two beautiful old structures. and that it would be very functional. We could have loading happening along the north driveway with the curb cut that exists. And we can make it so that the entrance to the public buildings, the three older buildings, could all come from the central location of what's now the garage for the carriage house. Huh. It, there we go. Sorry. I think there was a plan there that we went through. Yeah. Okay. So we started looking at how to build this. And at first I was a little nervous because there's quite a bit of program that's needed for the storage, for the collections, archives, the gallery. We need elevator, we need at least 2 stairs for safe way out of the upper floors. We need restrooms that don't exist in an adequate manner for the carriage house if we're to use the carriage house. We looked at putting those facilities into the carriage house themselves, and it took over the carriage house. There wasn't much room left of the beautiful old spaces. So it became pretty clear early on that those necessary support spaces to allow the carriage house to be used for really beautiful public events, education, community services, all the things we wanted to do, both the upper floor and the main floor, we needed to get those support spaces into the new history center too. So if we put a gable roof on it of the same slope and shed, it was very threatening, it seemed to me, and very large, overwhelmed the little garage and was quite honestly overwhelming the carriage house too. So then we thought, well, what if we just give it a flat roof? Does that make it better? Yes, it makes it better. It's still rather large and it still seems kind of ungainly, even though it's logical that we could bring all those necessary support functions into an adjacent connected building. So then we started looking at shaping it so that the gallery upstairs was smaller, held back. The archives collection were the lower structure. We would have that cornice line tie into the cornice line of the carriage house. We would give a little courtyard between the new building and the garage, so it's not just juxtaposed right up against it. We wouldn't have to alter, change, or even obscure the historic facade of the garage building. And I like this. This seemed more gentle. We even talked about the courtyard being a place to bring in light, to put in landscaping, to give some sense of something living and growing in a history center. And it seemed like a really good thing. And then lastly, we started thinking that maybe that wall, which really wants to be solid, behind it is this very valuable collection that wants to have the maintenance of temperature and humidity year-round in a very narrow range so that the metals and the paper and the leather goods, all those don't get degraded over time. In order to do that, we really don't want windows into those spaces. So by growing landscape on it and thinking of it as a landscape element and having it again all be kind of subservient to the carriage house, I started feeling more and more comfortable with it. So it would meet the program. So that kind of led us through a lot of discussion about what this could be. And we started looking at this is just a site plan, looking down on it, but just get your place. Carson House in the upper left, Hotchkiss Filer in the lower left. On the lower right, we have the carriage house in question and the new addition with all the arrows on it showing how the water would drain. The idea that you would enter in a way we don't today through that beautiful porte cochere of the Hotchkiss Filer, come in, see the glassy opening to the current garage and realize that's the reception, information, place of entrance for all 3 buildings where you could get directed to where you need to go if you weren't clear about whether you're going to a museum function, an education function, a community meeting, a reception, all that. If you were visiting professional and you were meeting one of the curators to go into the archives or into the collection, all that would happen in that one place. So that's the picture on the right with Mark walking towards the garage door. See if that works. Yeah, these are the floor plans. So the lower floor, by suppressing it a floor, we're able to keep that mass down so it doesn't overwhelm the carriage house. That's on the left. And that's drawing 1 if you were to look at the legend. But that's a large storage room, which is what Mark and Gail need at a minimum to support the collections they have. Part of the story here is that by having an adequate storage area in the new building, we can vacate that storage use from the upper floor of the carriage house and some of the back rooms of the carriage house. So that can come back to being a really beautifully used public space instead of now having to use it for support and storage. On the main floor, the drawing in the middle, you'd see there's the entries where it says entrance, that's the garage. That multi-purpose room that Gail talked about, we'd like to put glass there instead of the plywood and let that be a really multi-purpose classroom that's used as a workroom, can be part of events. And then importantly, the pale yellow connects you to restrooms, an elevator, the reading room. So all the things you need to make the carriage house, sorry, work really well. We wouldn't try to jam into the carriage house and compromise it. And then on the top floor, we have a gallery that flows through that second floor lobby into what we're calling the event space. You see in green at the bottom of the lower right drawing. And that's that beautiful space, if you've ever been up there, that was built 1880s, 1895. Yeah, beautiful. And that was the Hotchkiss Construction Company, right? Hotchkiss Brothers, yeah. It's beautiful woodwork up there, big windows, and it's never used by any of us. But to be able to do that, I think would be fantastic. And then these sections are just technical drawings. We included them just in case there's questions. But the idea for both the durability and the economy is that everything in blue is concrete. We've been working with our good partners at O&G to think through the logic of how to do this soundly and cost effectively, because that cuts into the hill to suppress it. And then everything above in yellow is lightweight metal construction. We're looking at how to integrate the mechanical systems and basically have this be a very functional integrated building that meets the museum needs at the same time. So these are just a few, again, very preliminary images, but just to show the idea from the east, from the cemetery, a very light connector that barely touches the beautiful old carriage house to the new history center, a stairway which is open, the gallery above, the reading room below, the archives and storage. If we rotate the camera a little bit towards the southeast, just to look into that neck that separates the building, we really don't want to build right up against the carriage house and destroy that beautiful old woodwork. And then pulling back from the southeast, if you were coming through the porte cochere, you would see the entry, you'd see a community room, whether it's part of an event, whether it's a workshop, whether it's a classroom, but something happening. You could see now into the windows on the second floor where there may be an event or a gathering. And if there were a reception before, after, during a gallery exhibit, we think the lower flat floor, which we're doing primarily to hold the massing back, also becomes a really nice place to have a terrace. And so lastly, that's the overall image of where we are, trying to keep the two buildings functionally connected, but visually separated. So the old carriage house has a newfound dignity and all the support it needs happens in the new building. Meanwhile, the program, all these collections that are the very backbone of the museum, have a real adequate storage space. So thank you.